Let's review this quiz on imperialism in preparation for the global history regions. So, number one, it says in the late 19th century, most European nations required their colonial territories to what? And by colonial territories, I know they mean places in Africa or Southeast Asia, right? To do what? Was it become industrial nations and complete in the world market, or maybe compete in the world market? Was it B, preserve their customs and traditions? No, I know preserve means sort of save, and the European nations were not interested in that, so we can cross out B. Was it C, import mineral resources from Europe? I don't think places in Europe were sending it out to Africa, so I can scratch that from the list. And let's take a look at the last one. Purchase manufactured goods from the colonial power. The colonial power would be these European nations. And yeah, these European nations wanted countries in Africa to buy their products. So the answer for number one is D. Question number two. During the 19th century, the African continent was affected most by what? Was it the commercial revolution? No. Was it the introduction of socialism? Well, I know that socialism didn't really take hold in Africa, so we can cross that out. Was it the Crusades? Well, I know the Crusades happened earlier than the 19th century, and I know that it didn't take place in Africa, so we can cross this off the list. And considering this is a quiz on imperialism, and I know that imperialism was rampant in Africa during the 19th century, the answer to number two is D. Question number three. After 1880, European nations sought colonies in Africa primarily because the Europeans were what? When it says sought colonies, that means they wanted to create colonies or maybe expand their empire in Africa because these Europeans wanted to do what? Was it that they were in need of land for their surplus populations? That means, did they want to sort of send Europeans to Africa because they had too many people? No, I know that's not the case, so we can cross that one out. Let's look at B. So it says, were they competing for raw materials and markets? Yeah, we just learned about the Industrial Revolution, and we know that they needed raw materials and markets, and so that seems very plausible. We'll return to that in a second. Let's take a look at number C. Was it that they were determined to bring Christianity to the Muslim world? I think that's maybe important, so we'll leave that there for right now. And number D, or letter D. Was it because they were interested in completing their geographic knowledge of the world? Were they just trying to make maps? No, not at all. So we're left with B and C. I'm thinking that B is the more appropriate answer, and that's it. That is the correct answer. B for number 3. Let's look at question number 4. It says, let's take a look at question number 4. Why were European nations able to conquer large sections of Africa in the 19th and early 20th centuries? Basically, why were European nations so successful in dominating? Was it because Europeans easily adapted to African climate and topography? I know that's not true, so we can scratch that one right on out. Was it because Europeans possessed more advanced military technology? Well, I know they had guns and like cannons and many individuals in Africa to not, so I'm thinking that it's probably be. I'll put a little question mark there. Was it C, Europeans wanted to learn about African cultures? No, I don't think that's appropriate. Or was it D, Africans wanted to trade with European nations? I think that might have been true, but I don't think that's the answer to why Europeans were successful in war. I think it's because they had lots of guns and ammunition and weaponry. The answer to number 4 is B. Let's take a look at question number 5. Base your answer to the following questions on this timeline right here. So I see 1860 to 1920. I see lots of words. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Let's first take a look at our options. What would be the best title for this timeline? I can see that A is the African independence movement, mineral discoveries in Africa, European imperialism in Africa, or ethnic conflict in Africa. Well, I know that this quiz is called imperialism, and I see the word imperialism, but let's shift back to this timeline, and I see this idea of diamonds being discovered. I see the Gold Coast. I see Portugal takes control of Angola, and all these ideas lend itself to this idea of European imperialism. That is the correct answer, letter C, for question number 5. Question number 6. The 19th century ideas of social Darwinism and the white man's burden were often used to justify what? Well, I remember that this idea of the white man's burden and social Darwinism um, relate to this idea of imperialism. I know it's not isolationism. We've never talked about appeasement. I know that disarmament has to do with this idea of relinquishing weapons and things like that. Clearly not the answer. The answer to number 6 is C, imperialism. Question number 7. The borders that were established for many African nations during the late 1800s were based primarily on what? So this is how they split up the continent of Africa. This question wants to know, how did that happen? Was it natural geographic barriers like mountains or lakes splitting up oceans, splitting up countries? Maybe that's it. We'll come back to that because I know that's how lots of other countries established their borders. Was it easy access to natural resources? No, that doesn't really make sense. We'll scratch that out. Was it territorial claims of colonial rulers? We know that colonial rulers are various European nations coming in and saying, this land is ours, even though obviously it was already occupied by people in these African nations. Territorial claims means that this space is ours, and I'm thinking that's probably it. Let's review letter D. Was it cultural differences between ethnic groups? That's also the case for many times we're establishing borders, but that's not appropriate right now. The best answer is C, territorial claims, for number 7. Here we have this poem by Rudyard Kipling for question number 8, The White Man's Burden, where he talks about these ideas associated with imperialism that are also kind of racist and kind of very ignorant. And it says, this stanza from Kipling's poem is most closely associated with the belief that it was the duty of Western colonial powers to do what? Was it learn from the people they conquered? The poem clearly does not talk about that. Was it teach their colonies how to produce manufactured goods? Well, that was the case, and that's what they did, but that's not what this poem's about. But I'm going to leave it there for the time being. Was it C, civilize the people they controlled? Yeah, I'm guessing that's the message that he wanted to convey. Or was it welcome less developed countries as equals? No, they definitely considered them to be inferior. They were very racist, and we know that because of this, the appropriate answer is C for question number 8. Number 9, this is a little bit different from the kinds of questions that we've been exploring earlier. Which was the most characteristic of the Meiji Restoration in Japan? Was it declining military strength, industrial growth, economic isolation, or was it political unrest? I know that it was industrial growth. They're doing a whole lot of that in Japan. The answer is B. Question number 10. Martin Luther's 95 Theses were a call for what exactly? Was it a religious revolt against German princes? No, I know that was not the case. Was it reforms or changes to improve the state within the Roman Catholic Church? I think that might be it. Let's check out C, greater papal authority. Was he looking for the Pope to have more power? Niet. Was it crusades to spread Christianity? Well, I know he wanted to sort of spread Christianity, but that's not what his objective was at all. It was to reform the Roman Catholic Church. B for number 10. Here we have a little bit of a throwback question. Which ancient civilization established the basis for Western democracy? Where did democracy come from, essentially? Was it the Phoenicians? No. Was it Egyptians? Maybe. I know they had a very advanced culture. Let's check out the other two. Was it Sumerians? Nope. Or was it the Greeks? Yeah. I know that the Greeks were the ones who sort of established this idea of Western democracy. The answer to number 11 is D.